On his 28th birthday, Julian chose to leap from the Golden Gate Bridge. The news hit Asher like a physical blow, a sudden darkness behind his eyes as a sharp, pulsing pain began to throb in his temples. He forced a grim laugh while on the phone with a friend, his voice a low growl. He remarked that the bastard had a real talent for timing. It was impeccable, really. The birthday was a write-off. Asher canceled everything, pushing aside meetings and deadlines, and caught the first red-eye flight to San Francisco. All that was left for him to find was a letter. Julian had written that Asher Hayes was a goddamn son of a bitch, a liar, and that by the time he read this, Julian would be gone. The letter explained that since Asher would probably starve without him, all of his money, every last damn cent, was now Asher's. He was ordered to spend it wisely and forbidden from wasting it on escorts. Julian had added a postscript threatening to haunt him if he did. Asher read the words through gritted teeth before folding the paper and putting it away. Even in death, the idiot was still calling him a son of a bitch. Julian was an orphan with no family to speak of. The funeral arrangements fell to Asher. Only a handful of people came, all dressed in somber black, offering him hollow condolences. He didn't feel much of anything. That same evening, after the burial, Asher took Julian's inheritance to an exclusive men's club called the Onyx Lounge and hired 3 of their prettiest boys. They were all sculpted and beautiful, whispering sweet words and pressing cold glasses of champagne into his hand, their bodies warm against his. But as the atmosphere thickened, a cold realization settled in Asher's stomach. No one compared to Julian. One boy's eyes weren't as sharp, another's skin not as pale. The third was too submissive, his obedience boring. None of them held a candle to Julian. Asher tilted his head back, draining a glass one of them offered, his gaze sweeping over their expectant faces. A faint, humorless smile touched his lips. He dismissed them with a soft but unyielding command to leave. The young men froze, their professional smiles faltering before they turned and shuffled out of the private room. One muttered under his breath about rich guys being moody, complaining that he'd thought he'd landed a generous one. Another nudged him sharply, hissing for him to shut up. He reminded his friend that this was Asher Hayes, from the news. His partner, the tech CEO, had just killed himself. He was obviously going through it. The advice was to keep his mouth shut unless he wanted to get his ass fired. Asher was more than just going through it. On the 4th day after Julian's death, the ache of his absence became a physical presence. He lost count of how many drinks he had that night. When he opened his eyes again, he was standing on a curb in his old-school uniform. A watch on his wrist, a model he hadn't worn in years, displayed the date, 2013, 10 years ago. From an alleyway at the end of the street, the sound of shouting erupted. The voices were young, a crude loop of familiar insults. Orphan, bastard, a kid with no parents. The words were punctuated by the sickening thud of fists and feet hitting flesh. Asher's brow furrowed, the sound drawing him into the narrow passage. His eyes landed on Julian. He wore the same summer uniform, pinned to the grimy asphalt by a group of teenagers with garishly dyed hair. His exposed skin was a canvas of bruises, new and old, with fresh blood seeping from several cuts. His face was a deathly white. Asher's heart seized. This was wrong. The Julian he knew was never this helpless, never this broken. He couldn't believe the confident, sharp-tongued man he'd loved had ever been so weak, taking a beating without fighting back. Asher snatched an empty beer bottle from the ground, smashing the bottom against the brick wall with a sharp crack. The teenagers flinched, turning to face him. One of them yelled, asking what the hell his problem was. Asher let a slow, dangerous smile spread across his face, advancing with the jagged bottle in hand. He moved through the circle of bullies until he stood over Julian's prone form. He answered that he was here to fight. As a former national MMA champion who could take on 10 guys by the time he was 15. He wasn't about to let these punks lay a hand on the man who would one day leave him a $10 million fortune. 10 minutes later, the rainbow-haired thugs were on their knees, sobbing. Asher backhanded the red-haired leader, a cool smile on his face as he asked if he thought he had the right to touch his boyfriend. He then turned his attention to the one with purple hair, his smile never wavering as he delivered another slap. He repeated the boy's insult about Julian being a bastard, then advised him that if he had a problem, he should see a vet because not even a dam could hold all the water in his head. He worked his way through them, his blows precise and merciless. He was about to deliver a final, menacing threat when he saw Julian struggling to his feet, using the wall for support. Julian wiped a smear of blood from his lip with the back of his hand, grabbed his backpack, and started to limp out of the alley. Asher forgot the bullies instantly, his voice sharp as he called out, asking where he was going. Julian paused for a fraction of a second, like a wind-up toy that had momentarily jammed, before continuing on his way, ignoring him completely. Asher cursed under his breath. He'd forgotten. This Julian didn't know him yet. He kicked the green-haired boy kneeling in front of him and yelled after Julian to stop. He threatened to break his arm if he took another step. The threat seemed to work. Julian froze. In the future, Asher rarely used Julian's name, preferring nicknames or insults. Saying it now felt foreign. He cleared his throat and closed the distance between them, reaching out to grab his arm. The moment his fingers made contact, Julian violently ripped his arm away. Asher's fingertips came away stained with Julian's blood. He glanced at the deep gash on Julian's arm and asked again where he was going, pointing out that his wounds needed to be treated. Julian didn't answer. He just stared, his beautiful, intelligent eyes filled not with the playful confidence Asher remembered, but with a guarded, wary suspicion. Asher sighed. He told Julian not to look at him like that. He enunciated Julian's name with perfect clarity this time. A flicker of surprise crossed Julian's face. He asked if Asher knew him. Asher confirmed that he did. He took Julian to the school nurse's office. The nurse was an old man who sighed dramatically upon seeing Julian, adjusting his glasses. He grumbled about Julian constantly showing up covered in bruises, him that nobody could withstand that kind of abuse. He hadn't been fighting, he'd been getting beaten. Asher smiled and gently pushed Julian down onto a chair, ruffling his hair. He told him to listen to the nurse and stop fighting. He then instructed Julian to pull up his pant leg so the nurse could check his injuries. Julian's head was bowed, but his hands remained still. Asher's patience wore thin. He clicked his tongue, asking if he was suddenly shy. After all the years they'd lived together, there wasn't a part of him Asher hadn't seen. He knelt in front of Julian and slowly rolled up his pant leg himself. His fingers brushed against Julian's ankle, then his calf. Above the calf, a brutal landscape of contusions, swollen and purple, was revealed. A deeper wound had torn the flesh open. On anyone else, such an injury would have made walking impossible. The nurse's face grew grim as he began to clean the wound. The moment the antiseptic-soaked cotton touched his skin, Julian's face went paler, and he bit down on his lip, instinctively pulling back. After a moment, he spoke his first word since entering the office. A quiet admission of pain escaped his lips. The nurse scowled, telling him to bear it and stop being so delicate. Asher stood and gently guided Julian's head into his chest. He informed the nurse that Julian had always been delicate. Then he whispered to Julian, telling him to hide his face and not look. It wouldn't hurt if he couldn't see. Julian struggled for a moment, but the nurse's angry shout for him to hold still made him freeze. Asher took the opportunity to hold him tighter, stroking his hair. Julian fell asleep after his wounds were treated. Asher sat by his bedside all afternoon. As dusk settled, he noticed a slight movement from the bed. He set down his book and waved a hand in front of Julian's face, asking if he was awake. Before he could ask how he was feeling, Julian turned his head, his gaze locking onto Asher's. The intensity in his eyes made Asher forget what he was about to say. After a beat of silence, Julian's voice was quiet but steady when he asked how Asher knew his name. Asher paused, considering his answer. Then he replied calmly that of course he knew him. He was his boyfriend. After a moment, he added a clarification. Not now, of course. In the future. Julian's lips thinned in disbelief. He accused Asher of talking nonsense. Asher reached out and squeezed his cheek, insisting he wasn't lying. Future boyfriend still counted. Julian slapped his hand away, his silence a clear testament to his skepticism. Asher marveled at how guarded the younger version of him was. He rubbed his hand and leaned closer, lowering his voice. He told Julian about the crescent-shaped birthmark on his inner thigh. He mentioned the small, round scars on his back from an orphanage bully's cigarette. He recounted Julian's fear of spiders, born from a cruel childhood prank, and his aversion to the dark, a relic from being locked in a closet for days. As Julian offered no denial, Asher knew he was right. A wave of sorrow washed over him. Julian's past was a bleak landscape devoid of kindness. Asher forced the subject to change, manufacturing a smile. He told Julian that all he needed to know was that Asher was his future partner. He had loved him so much he would have done anything for him, but Julian had run off with $10 million of his money and died in a car crash. So he had come back to find him. He leaned in, his eyes bright, and enunciated each word clearly. He was here to collect a debt. Julian's gaze sharpened. He asked if that meant he owed Asher $10 million. The amount was clearly staggering to him. Asher laughed, shaking his head. He didn't need the money. He explained that Julian had stolen more than just his money. He had stolen his heart. The debt was one of emotion. He declared that it would be repaid the day Julian fell in love with him. In the original timeline, though they attended the same high school, Asher had moved abroad his senior year, and they hadn't crossed paths again until he returned at 22. After Julian's death, Asher had found a hidden safe in their bedroom filled with antidepressants. He'd known Julian was sick during their 6 years together, but Julian had hidden the severity of it well. He'd seemed normal, aside from occasional insomnia and mental fog. His doctor had always said his condition was well managed, that he was showing signs of improvement. Yet he had still died. Asher never doubted Julian's love for him. He must have been in unimaginable pain to choose suicide on Asher's birthday. The psychiatrist had told him that Asher was Julian's primary connection to the world, but that eventually, even that connection wasn't enough to make him want to stay. At that moment, Asher had been consumed by a single thought. What if he had met him sooner? He would have been Julian's family. He would have loved him enough for a lifetime. But it was too late. The 6 a.m. alarm blared. Asher sat up, drenched in a cold sweat. He fumbled for his phone on the nightstand, his hands trembling. The screen glowed, 2013. Relief washed over him. He quickly got ready, and the family driver took him to school. His first order of business was to request a class transfer. His family had funded 2 new wings for the school. A simple transfer was nothing. By second period, he was walking into Julian's classroom. Julian sat in the back row by the window. A flicker of surprise crossed his face when he saw Asher, who offered him a small, knowing smile from the front of the room. Julian's hand, holding a pen, paused for a second before he returned to his work, head bowed. The dean suggested Asher take a seat in the 4th row, a prime spot he was clearly prepared to make available by displacing another student. Asher politely refused. He gestured with his chin towards the back of the room, pointing out the empty seat next to Julian. He said that would be fine. As he settled in, a student in front of them snickered, asking why a rich kid like him would want to sit back there. He explained that no one sat there because it was bad luck. Asher recognized the boy as one of the bullies from the alley. The dean, not missing a beat, shot the student a glare and snapped at him to get back to work. The boy retorted defiantly that he was only telling the truth. He claimed Julian was a jinx who'd cursed his own parents, which was why he was an orphan. He spewed vicious rumors about Julian's birth mother and the abuse from his adoptive parents, calling it karma. The dean, his authority crumbling, apologized to Asher before dragging the student out of the classroom. Asher glanced at Julian. He showed no reaction at all, calmly drawing a line on a geometry problem as if nothing had happened. It was so different from the man he knew, the one who would have flipped a table at the slightest provocation. In another life, Asher might have sneered at this weakness. Now he just felt a pang of empathy. He gently squeezed Julian's wrist, his voice soft as he asked if he was tired, suggesting he take a break. Julian pulled his arm away, moving slightly farther from him. He told Asher to be quiet and not to bother him. He was cold, so Asher stopped talking and simply rested his head on his desk, falling asleep. He slept through 3 classes, his dreams a chaotic mix of Julian. In one, Julian, just back from a business trip, was pressing him against a wall, his lips on his, demanding Asher loosen his tie. In another, Asher was watching him jump into the churning sea, finding only a hastily scrawled note on the shore. He woke up exhausted, blinking his eyes open to find Julian's hand on his forehead, checking his temperature. His voice was hoarse as he asked what he was doing. Julian explained that he was checking for a fever, withdrawing his hand. He then asked if Asher was cold, noting that he had been shivering in his sleep. Asher didn't answer. He sat up, only then noticing Julian's school jacket draped over his shoulders. The window next to their desk, which had been open, was now closed. Asher observed that Julian seemed quite concerned about him. Julian looked away, denying it. Asher knew he was lying. He had loved him in the last life. He would love him in this one, too. A girl from the front row turned around and handed him a folded piece of paper. She told him it was for him. He asked what it was. She said it was a love letter. At the words, Julian shot him an unreadable glance before looking away. Asher pushed the note back to the girl, stating that he already liked someone. The girl shrugged, popping a lollipop into her mouth. She pointed out that just liking someone wasn't the same as being with them, but she wished him luck anyway. Asher glanced at Julian, who was engrossed in his textbook, and thanked her. He skipped the evening study session. As soon as the last class ended, he made a call and had the bullies from the other day dealt with again, with special attention paid to the loudmouth from class. Just as he was about to head back to find Julian, he saw him leaving the school, his head down, hood up, walking quickly. This was strange. Julian never skipped study hall. Asher watched him for a moment before getting into his car and telling the driver to follow him. The car trailed Julian to the front of the Onyx Lounge. Asher knew Julian wasn't there for illicit reasons. Given his financial state, he was there to make money. The Julian he knew had built a $10 million empire from nothing. He was a natural when it came to business. Asher dismissed the driver and followed Julian inside. In 2013, the club was a riot of neon lights and pulsing music, a stark contrast to the elegant establishment it would become. He lost Julian in the crowd almost immediately, but then he saw someone he never expected to see there. His father, Arthur Hayes. Arthur, though over 40, looked younger. He was tall and imposing in a black overcoat, a glass of whiskey in one hand and a beautiful young man in his other. He laughed at something someone said, then took a sip of his drink and passed it to the man in his arms, mouth to mouth. The crowd cheered. Arthur quieted them with a raised hand, a faint smile on his lips as he told them not to scare the boy. A wave of nausea washed over Asher. So this is what his father was so busy with all those years. He thought of his mother, locked away in a sanatorium, and finally understood the source of her madness. He stumbled backward, knocking over a tray of drinks. The sound of shattering glass cut through the music. The world began to spin, a roar filling his ears. He braced himself against a wall, sinking to the floor. A hand gripped his shoulder, another his wrist. Through a blurry haze, he saw Julian kneeling in front of him, his voice laced with uncharacteristic urgency as he asked what was wrong. Asher grabbed Julian's hand, glancing towards his father. The chaos had shielded them. Arthur hadn't noticed. Asher forced a smile, lying that he had been worried about Julian and had followed him here. He pleaded for Julian to take him outside. Julian, sensing something was deeply wrong but not pressing the issue, nodded and let him out. Once outside, he turned to Asher. He stated, unprompted, that he hadn't done anything he shouldn't have in there. Asher, his mind still reeling, didn't understand. Julian explained that the clientele at the club were wealthy and influential, so the staff often sought to learn new skills to please them. He sometimes came to tutor them to earn some extra money. He was explaining himself. Asher looked at Julian's face, sculpted and beautiful under the garish lights, and pulled him into a hug. Julian's body went rigid for a moment before relaxing. Asher rested his chin on his shoulder. He knew. He told Julian he knew how hard he worked. Back in the empty family mansion, Asher didn't turn on the lights. Images of his father flashed through his mind. He once asked Arthur why he never visited his mother. Arthur had replied that there was no point. She had backed herself into a corner she couldn't escape. Asher stayed awake until the early hours of the morning before finding his old sleeping pills and swallowing a handful. He dreamed of the Julian from his past life. Even when they were together, Julian was always working, driven by a relentless ambition. There was only one exception: the time Asher got sick. He'd woken up with a headache that had escalated into a high fever by evening. A friend, worried, had called Julian, who was away on a business trip. Julian had called him, his voice calm, simply telling Asher to rest. Later that night, Julian had walked into his office, having abandoned his work and caught the first flight back. He looked exhausted, but without a word, he took Asher to the hospital. In the middle of the night, Asher woke from the fever to see Julian asleep in a chair by his bed. He gently draped a blanket over him, but the small movement woke him. Asher, ever contrary, had snapped at him, asking if he was crazy. Couldn't he have waited a few days? It's not like he was dying. Julian had just smiled and checked his forehead. Later, he had taken Asher's hand, his thumb tracing patterns on his palm. He'd said quietly that he was worried. He whispered that trouble follows Asher, that he couldn't die. What would he do if Asher died? Asher hadn't understood his anxiety then. He'd pulled his hand away, accusing him of being morbid. Julian had just tucked him back in and left the room. The next day, he was booking a flight back to his business trip. His subordinates used to say he valued money more than his life. Now Asher understood. It was about security. Money was the only tangible connection he had to a world that had given him nothing. And in the end, even that wasn't enough. He had left it all behind for Asher. The next day was Saturday. Asher woke up late, the nightmare of Julian's death still clinging to him. He went for a walk near Julian's neighborhood, trying to think of an excuse to see him. A tiny, scruffy kitten darted out from a bush. It was surprisingly friendly, rubbing against his leg. He pet it, and an idea sparked in his mind, echoing the psychiatrist's words about establishing a connection to the world. A pet, dependent on Julian for its very survival, would be a perfect tether. He arranged for cat food to be delivered and spent the next several days luring the kitten to the path Julian took home from school. Soon, the cat was comfortable with him, and Julian had started to notice it. One rainy afternoon, Asher followed Julian, hiding under an umbrella. He watched as Julian, who always acted like he didn't care about anything, gave his own umbrella to the kitten, leaving it to shelter the small animal as he walked home in the downpour. Asher then made his move, stepping out and coincidentally appearing by his side, holding his own umbrella over Julian's head. He teased him for not checking the weather. Julian just mumbled his thanks and took the umbrella, his taller frame allowing him to shield both of them. He angled it so more of the umbrella covered Asher. They walked in silence. A few days later, Asher scooped up the now familiar kitten, which he'd named Ghost, and took it to the vet. While there, he texted Julian, telling him he'd adopted the stray. A familiar voice called his name. It was the girl who had given him the love letter. She asked if the kitten was his, expressing surprise that he'd chosen a stray. Asher confirmed it was. She asked if he adopted him simply because he liked animals. Asher nodded, but then added that it wasn't just that. He had another reason. He was going to use it to win Julian's affection. The girl's eyes widened in understanding. He sent Julian a picture of Ghost. The reply came much later, for simple words. He is very cute. But Julian never came to see the cat. The plan wasn't working, so Asher decided to be more direct. He would take Ghost to Julian and claim he could no longer care for him, implying the cat might not survive the winter without a home. The GPS failed him near Julian's neighborhood, a maze of dilapidated tenements. He got out of the car and walked, Ghost cradled in his arms. The area was cramped and smelled of decay. This was where Julian had grown up, a world away from the polished, sophisticated man he would become. He finally found the right building. As he approached, the sound of shouting and crashing pottery erupted from inside. A man and a woman were screaming at each other about layoffs at a factory and the burden of their adopted jinx of a son. His adoptive parents. Asher's heart sank. He pulled out his phone and texted Julian. He wrote that he missed him and was downstairs with Ghost. A reply came instantly, "Okay, wait." A few minutes later, Julian emerged. The first thing he did was frown, asking why Asher was dressed so lightly. He'd get cold. He took Ghost, then glanced back at the door from which the shouting still faintly emanated. He asked Asher if he was cold. Asher took Julian's wrist, his voice low. He said he was fine, he just wanted to see him. All his earlier excitement had evaporated, replaced by a desperate urge to pull Julian away from this place forever. He forced a smile and led him to a nearby stoop where they could sit. Julian stroked the cat, a quiet intimacy settling between them. Asher knew what the future held. In a few months, his father and Julian's adoptive parents would die in the same car crash. Even though they were cruel, Julian considered them family. He would be left utterly alone. His depression, the doctor had said, was rooted in this past trauma. They could die, but Julian had to live. Julian must have sensed his dark mood. He nudged Asher with the cat's paw, asking what was wrong. Asher looked at him and asked if, given the chance, he would adopt Ghost. Julian's gaze dropped to the cat in his lap. After a long moment, he said he couldn't. He explained that when you adopt a pet, you have to be responsible for it. His own life was too unstable. Asher's heart ached. He proposed another solution. He asked Julian to move in with him. They could raise Ghost together. Julian looked at him, surprised, and then refused. It was out of the question. He softened his rejection by gently touching Asher's cheek. The contact so brief Asher almost thought he'd imagined it. He offered a compromise. If Asher wanted to see him, he would come to him. They didn't have to live together. It was a start. The next weekend, Asher went to the South Mountain Sanatorium. The staff told him his mother, Eloise, was deteriorating. She no longer recognized familiar faces. She might not recognize him. Asher entered her dark, curtain-drawn room. She sat alone, her hair unkempt. When she saw him, a sharp, broken laugh escaped her lips. She demanded to know where Arthur was, her voice rising to a shriek. She asked if he was dead. She screamed at Asher, asking why he wasn't dead yet, saying his eyes were just like his father's. She confessed that she should have strangled him at birth. She called him a monster, just like the man who fathered him. She grabbed a shard from a shattered vase, her voice a desperate, wounded cry as she shrieked at him to stay away. Asher walked towards her, ignoring the call button on the wall. He let the porcelain shard dig into his palm, blood welling up instantly. Eloise gasped and scrambled back. For the first time in this life or the last, Asher hugged his mother. He told her he couldn't die because someone in this world still needed him, someone who couldn't live without him. But he made her a promise. Arthur Hayes would not live past the end of the year. He would pay for what he'd done to her. He didn't remember leaving the sanatorium or how he ended up at the foot of Julian's building. It was dark, and his vision was blurry from blood loss and emotional exhaustion. He saw a door open, a figure silhouetted in the light. It was Julian. Asher stumbled forward, his voice a hoarse whisper as he asked if he was real. The image of Julian falling into the sea flashed in his mind. His body shook uncontrollably as he reached out, needing to touch him to be sure. Julian, who would normally have pushed him away, froze. His voice was laced with disbelief and a tremor of emotion Asher had never heard before. He asked if Asher was crying. Julian sat him down on the steps and tended to his bleeding hand. The antiseptic stung, and Asher flinched. Julian paused, then gently covered his eyes with his free hand. He said it wouldn't hurt if he couldn't see. Asher was speechless. Those were his own words, from the nurse's office. He reached up with his uninjured hand and touched Julian's face. He traced the line of his lips. He asked him directly if he liked him. The question hung in the air, heavy and raw. Julian was silent, his body rigid. Asher smiled faintly, saying he would take his silence as a no. It didn't matter as long as he was alive. Just as he closed his eyes, accepting the end of the conversation, Julian's voice, barely a whisper, broke the silence. He said it wasn't that. In early July, a multi-car pileup on the coastal highway claimed 3 lives: Julian's adoptive parents and Asher's father. The prophecy was fulfilled. Julian handled the funeral arrangements alone. Asher met him at the cemetery gates as a light rain began to fall. Julian emerged from the mist, holding a black umbrella, his expression unreadable. He got into the car, and Asher reached over, ruffling his damp hair. He spoke his name, his voice soft but firm. He told Julian that he still had him, that he would always be there, and he would always love him. From a life that was Julian's 27th birthday, Asher had rushed back to the city. Julian, as usual, was indifferent to the celebration. Asher had presented a cake, ordering him to make a wish. He had to wish that he would love Asher forever. Julian had looked at him, a rare softness in his eyes. He said that wishes don't come true if you say them out loud. So Asher had told him to wish for it in his heart. Julian closed his eyes, and when he opened them, he leaned in and brushed his lips against Asher's. It was barely a kiss. He confessed that he hadn't made a wish at all. Some things, he said, don't require wishes to come true. He told Asher to use the wish for himself. He asked him what his wish was. Asher had said nothing. His wish had been for Julian to live a long, long life. From a time before, a New Year's card from Julian. The only words on it were, "I knew you'd peak. I love you," and a memory of Julian smiling sadly, telling him that the world wasn't good, but Asher was. Only him. Asher felt like he was moss growing in a dark, damp crevice, surviving without sunlight, only to have the last bit of air stolen from him. But he had been given a second chance. The world was a chaotic place. There was only one rule now. You must love me forever. He woke with a start, the dream of a dark, violent sea fresh in his mind. A dream of Julian, turning his back and stepping into the abyss without a moment's hesitation. Cold sweat trickled down his temple. His heart hammered against his ribs. Why hadn't it been him? A hand slid around his waist, pulling him close, a palm rubbing gentle circles on his back. A voice murmured his name, telling him to wake up. Julian switched on the lamp, his arms wrapping around Asher, holding him tight. "It was just a dream," he whispered. "I'm here."